Hey guys, welcome back. Mel Williams. On this channel, I like to talk about men's emotional health and well-being and the cost of patriarchy to the quality of your life and relationships. So continuing from our last video, we're talking about this book by Giselle Pellicot, and basically the story that she's sharing here. Again, highly recommend that you read this book. In this video, we're going to be talking about men's response to shame and the habits surrounding how you guys have been dealing with shame, and really the need for men. When you hear women telling stories like this is an extreme story, but when you hear women telling stories like this, you need to be able to possess the skill and the capability, the capacity within yourself to self-reflect, maybe take ownership, and to act. Okay, a lot of you, what you're doing is nothing. Okay, you're avoiding, deflecting, running, and it's only going to be worse. Okay, it's only going to make things worse. So doing nothing, hiding, running is the worst thing that you can do because it lets it fester. So in my previous video, we talked also about how patriarchy culture marks you guys from often very early ages. You're being marked to feel shame. Oftentimes shaming is a tactic that was used by, the man and the woman in your family to basically traumatize you. And so whenever women are sharing our stories and you feel that same feeling of shame being triggered, then a lot of you get defensive. Okay, so in this video, we want to talk about the habits surrounding how to deal with shame, and help you develop better habits for that. Okay, because again, ultimately the goal is not to shame you. It is not to make you feel bad about existing as a man. It is, again, really a call to action for the men that are bad actors to be dealt with. So again, another key point from this book is that it helped me better understand how when women are expressing our issues and ourselves on our issues with men, why a lot of men collectively get defensive. Okay, I see better now why that is happening. It is because you have already been infected to varying degrees. You take it personally that a woman you've never met is speaking negatively about a man or men in general being so dangerous or harming women because you've either lived it or experienced it first or second hand yourself, so you've already been marked, and or you have become convinced that keeping the system running the way that it is what is best for your life, which means not listening to or believing women even when they're trying to help you. And again, women are angry and upset. Again, she's one of the few that does a great job of sharing her story and not being venting angry and necessarily upset, so to speak. She does a great job of a voice that is used to be more conversational and understanding, which is why I encourage you guys to read this book. Because really, again, when women are hurting, and sometimes the way that we're going to express ourselves is not going to be, nice or pretty. It's going to be messy. And so what men need to be able to pull out of that is that, hey, something needs to change. Something needs to be done differently. Something needs to be done better. And oftentimes it ties back to change in patriarchy culture, where men are being allowed to get away with doing stuff like this. And for the men out there that are like, well, hey, that has nothing to do with me. I'm not involved. I don't hit women. I don't do X, Y, and the third. Again, what you need to hear is like, this is women's experiences. It's going to impact your quality of life and experiences with women, because women don't know, who is good, who is bad. We don't know that. And of course, these men that are bad actors, they're not wearing a sign on their forehead that says, I'm going to hurt you. They oftentimes, like in this story, they are a good man until they're not. Okay. And there's no preparing and telling for that. You guys should understand that as well. You want to live in this fantasy world patriarchy has systematically created, where women are just objects of your fantasy and not real human beings. This separation has become so visceral that a man can rape and violently beat a woman, and it's like he's doing it to a piece of furniture or property. This is why men can make disconnected decisions to commit acts like stalking and raping women and think that they can remain disconnected from the labels of the crime. Okay, so in this book, like the men that are on trial, they're like, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, that's not me. Or I was drugged, or I was tricked. She was, into it. She was consensual, even though she's completely drugged and knocked out. Like, these men were basically denying it, all 50 of them. She was dealing with all 50 of them in the courtroom at the same time. And all of them had different versions of the story of denying what they did, even though there was graphic video showing them in the act with her husband doing this to her. Okay, so graphic evidence. So this is one of the habits that we don't want to develop. That is a red flag. Okay, is that whenever women are telling their stories, even when they have documented evidence, okay, we don't want to deny, we don't want to deflect, we don't want to minimize the pain and the sufferings of women. Okay, when it comes to that, yeah, you might feel shame. These men, even one of them said something along the lines like, I can't handle being labeled a rapist, even though, he did what he did. He's like, I can't live with the reality of dealing with being labeled a criminal and a rapist. And this really describes the disconnect that patriarchy culture creates in men. You think that it's okay to behave and act a certain way, to live out fantasies, because patriarchy promised you that if you are a manly man, that you get to dominate women and X, Y, and the third. And then the reality is when you're held accountable for your crime, you can't accept, live with that consequence of what you've done. So there's this splitting of self, like we talked about in my last video, that allows men to feel like, hey, I can live this fantasy life over here and not deal with the reality. This is the case with so many men that are cheating on their wives and their family. They go and live this fantasy life over here, their fantasy sex life, whatever. And then the reality is when they come home, it's like they're a different self, different man. Okay? Again, if you read this book, you will understand that. All right. So this is why men can make disconnected decisions and commit acts like stalking and raping women and think that they can remain disconnected from the labels of the crime. These sort of men have already accepted what they are and they live in denial, or they live in denial. They fantasize about violating women, but when they are labeled a woman beater or a rapist, they deny it because they legit can't live with it or connect the dots. Literally can't distinguish reality from the fantasy lies patriarchy has systematically been selling men for centuries now. So men need to stop avoiding their emotions and learn how to process. Okay, again, patriarchy culture has taught you guys to avoid your emotions, to numb them, to never learn how to process them. And this is the disconnect, the splitting of self that it is creating. It is creating this reality where you guys feel like you can compartmentalize and live completely different lives. Okay, you're one person at work, you're one person at home, you're one person with your family. Like, it's these splitting of selves, and it is not healthy. Okay, you do not always need a therapist. You just need to learn how to get comfortable facing yourself and loving yourself. Being selfish and getting a bunch of stuff isn't loving yourself. Okay, so a man being selfish, we talk about self-love, we think it's going to the spa, taking care of your physical appearance, X, Y, and third. All of those things are part of loving yourself, but that is not the loving yourself that we're talking about when we talk about healing. Okay, loving yourself is being able to accept yourself wholly as you are, to address the low self-esteem that many of you guys have, that you're not enough, that you're not man enough, and to be able to define your manhood in your own terms and not rely on other men to define that for you, okay, or not be influenced by other men to define that for you. Being selfish and getting yourself a bunch of stuff, going on a bunch of trips, vacation and whatnot, living a luxury lifestyle, that is not loving yourself. That's part of it, but that is not the core part of what we're talking about in these videos. Being content living in the skin that you're in, that you wake up to in every day, that is what it takes. Ultimately, that is what it takes. And many of you are not going to be able to do that until you deal with your trauma, okay? Deal with your past trauma and heal that. Most of us don't really stop to think about how we're really doing on the inside. We just move through life largely on autopilot, which is what the system wants, okay? In a way, I felt like we've already been taken over by a zombie robot apocalypse, okay? I feel like there's like a real zombie apocalypse going on, and it's been going on for centuries. We're only just now getting around to building the robots who everyone fears might eventually destroy us and replace us, okay? So like AI and whatnot. But on a real scale, like you've already been having your humanity stripped out of you for centuries, okay? Patriarchy culture basically wants you to be non-feeling robots, okay? To not be human, to be these strong, superhuman robots, basically, with no feelings, killing machines, okay? That's basically what patriarchy culture is conditioning you guys to be. And it's conditioning women to accept you as that and to define that as masculine, also not good. Okay? So again, kind of like in this apocalypse already, where we're not even human. All right? And we're scared of the robots that we're building. So make it make sense. The second point that I want to cover in this video is about men's deeply rooted pain and fear of abandonment and of not feeling needed. Not knowing how to deal with these insecurities is what has led to the patriarchy system that we are dealing with today. Okay, this is where men taking economic control over everything and making laws that women can't work and provide for themselves, so that women have to solely depend on a man. Like, there's this great insecurity that men have been carrying for centuries, and again, passing down through generations, that it's your job to be protector and provider, and if you're not doing that, then you're not a man. And women being in the workforce, providing for herself, doing for herself, it feels threatening to your identity as a man, because patriarchy culture has conditioned you for the longest that, hey, that's my job. I'm supposed to be protector and provider, and if a woman is able to do that for herself, then what's my role? What's my identity? This is where this identity crisis comes in for a lot of men, and why a lot of men feel that women are at fault for for basically just taking care of ourselves, okay? And again, this goes back to an insecurity from long ago, to where men took economical power and control and basically made women rely on men, okay? So again, this is a problem, a fear of abandonment and a fear of not being needed, that is gravely like embedded and marked in men with patriarchy culture. Because again, who says that your identity has to be defined by what you can do for women, by being a protector and provider? Who says that masculinity has to be defined as that? Okay, where did you learn that? It's coming from patriarchy culture. Collectively, most men don't realize it's projecting your own fears onto others when you say things like you're going to die alone. Okay, a lot of men that are trolling online use that to women that are, speaking up for themselves, whatever the case might be. You can't know that as a fact, yet you say it like it is one anyway. You say this very specific fear to women who make you feel a very specific thing, which is that she doesn't need a man and that it's internalized as she doesn't need you. Okay. So again, a lot of this projection is internalized fear. Okay. It's fear that is being projected onto women. So when you see men collectively like responding this way, then it's like, again, this patriarchy culture is not a one-off incident. It is a culture, a patriarchy culture that is causing a lot of men to behave and respond in the same similar manner. Okay, it's systematic. It reminds you that women are also human beings, not weak, helpless, childlike beings or objects that men own. So men legit think saying dying alone is what keeps the system in check and running to scare women into settling for any man who treats them any way. So again, now you become an enforcer if you are a troll going around and saying things like, well, that's why you're going to die alone, and women talking about they don't need a man, blah 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 blah. Like, this is the system speaking through you, okay? The culture that's trying to reassert itself. That is exactly what is happening. Such men continue to attack women with their words and trolling because it is a sign that they have been marked by the system. If women were to ever raise their standards and hope for better, then it means that he's going to be alone, and we're heading back to the origins of how patriarchy systems even began in the first place, which was early men didn't learn how to deal with independent women. Okay, long before we had patriarchy culture, system, and all of that, religions and all of that, both men and women were basically independent. Okay, they could take care of it and provide for themselves. And there were even a lot more cultures where the woman was the one that was, leader, protector, hunter, all these other things. Okay, basically women did it all. Women took care of ourselves, and there wasn't this whole, maybe there was, because obviously we have patriarchy culture today, but the culture of that time wasn't based on one gender being insecure and the other having to rely heavily on that gender. Okay, it was just more of a community basis. Okay, it wasn't this insecurity and fear of being abandoned or being seen as useless. Okay, the identity wasn't necessarily that, hey, this is what a man does, this is what a woman does. It wasn't like that. Okay, at least based on what history shows us, what we found in history. So early men didn't learn how to deal with independent women. That's why we have patriarchy culture. It was this insecurity and fear that created patriarchy, and this is exactly the same fear that persists to this day for a large group of men trying to revert things back, go back to the traditional way things were, before women were finally seen and treated as more like human beings with the same right to take out a loan or get a credit card or a mortgage, to work a job outside of the home, to leave an abusive marriage, and to exercise the right to vote. Okay, so literally the fact that we have men today, large collective groups of men that believe that a woman shouldn't vote, she shouldn't be out in the workforce, X, Y, and the third, even though the economy has changed. And like literally very few families can survive on just one income. Like we still have men out there talking about it's women's fault that they're out there in the workforce, blah, 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 instead of looking at the facts that the economy has changed. Okay, we are not living in the same economy that we were 50 years ago. The dollar doesn't go as far as it did back then. Okay, so these men felt a need to force women to depend on them, which invented patriarchy and inverted a lot of the natural order of things. The issue we face today is that men are still actively choosing not to learn for their own healing and self-betterment because they are still being sold the fantasy lie of patriarchy on how to exist as men. Okay, before we invented gender terminology, we were all just human. We were all still just human, and the same way we invented these terms and boxes to fit ourselves into, we can create new ones to redefine ourselves. Okay, so what really needs to happen with men and masculinity, the definition needs to evolve. Stop trying to go back to the way things were, traditional and all that. You need to evolve with the times. You need to come up with a new definition of what it means to be a man. Times have changed. Stop going back to the past. If you look at any theory on evolution and whatnot, you see that what changes, what adapts to the current environment and changes, that is what survives. That is what moves forward. That is what the future is, okay? If you continue to go back to the past, you're basically, like I like to say, you're devolving. You are basically dying, okay? You are holding on to the past instead of moving forward with change in the future. And I know that change can be a very scary thing, but too many men are still clinging to the past and trying to go back to the way things used to be in an economy that is nowhere what it was like, even 10 years ago. Okay, so the reality needs to set in that going back to the past is really like a death. Whether it's a self death, society death, whatever it is, it's just not going to work. Okay, so we need to stop trying to go back to the past, and men need to create new identities, redefine yourselves, redefine masculinity to something that's more inclusive, to partnering and working alongside women instead of this us against them or us dominating. Okay, that is not healthy, and it has never been healthy. You can't be scared of change. You can't be afraid to break out of the hell that you have learned to normalize due to patriarchy culture. Okay, patriarchy culture does a lot to hurt men, which is what we will talk more about, and why I highly recommend that you read this book, The Will to Change. It does a great job breaking that down. But yeah, we will talk about that a lot more in next month's videos, okay? There are 3 more points that I want to make in this video when it comes to the habits that you guys are developing when it comes to women sharing our stories in shame. Okay, so the first habit was that a lot of you guys are feeling a sense of internalized shame and denial. Okay, so the first thing that is happening is that you guys are denying. The second thing is that you start to feel this sense of degraded self-worth, that, hey, I'm being abandoned, this fear of abandonment and insecurity. Now, the third thing that we're going to talk about is that patriarchy really reduces both men and women down to sex objects, okay? These habits that we are forming due to patriarchy culture, and when women share our stories, women are quite aware of this happening already, but I don't think we as a society are yet aware of the extent and the different ways that it has been happening on men's side, okay? So first, the sexual objectification of men is happening by men, and it's men that is doing it to themselves and each other most of the time. Yes, sometimes it's a woman that, rapes a man or whatever the case might be, but oftentimes it is men who have been conditioned by patriarchy culture that as a man, they're entitled to sex and whatever else, that sex is how you find your masculinity and manhood. This is by men, okay? A lot of times in patriarchy culture, women are socialized that, being sexual and expressing our sexuality is bad, it's promiscuous. So a lot of times it's coming from men, okay, that have been told that it's okay for you to express your wild sexual nature, blah, 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 okay? So again, first, this sexual objectification of men is happening by men, and it's men that are doing it to themselves, to each other, to a large degree. When men care so deeply about a woman's body count, it is a sign that man discounts her humanity and views her value from her body primarily first. Most men who cheat can't handle being cheated on because it triggers the deep-seated wound of not being enough and being abandoned and left alone. Also, the fact that the size of a man's private part is a big enough topic that it is tied to a man's identity and whether he is man enough. Sure, a woman might have a preference on size, but men basically idolize, worship, and internalize their masculinity or lack thereof based on whether or not they were born with a big enough private part. If it is small, then men are conditioned to believe it makes them less of a man, and it's something that they need to be insecure about. The opposite end of the spectrum is true, is that men who are born with a bigger private part, they take special pride in that. But regardless of the size that you are, it's something that all men at some point learn to be highly conscious of, okay? So this is another habit. Unfortunately, when it comes to what we're talking about with the shaming of men, is the size, okay? The size of your private part, as well as whether or not you perform well in the bedroom, whether or not you're enough muscle and that you look masculine enough. Sexual objectification of men is happening as well. We see it more so happening to women, but it also, in patriarchy culture, you guys are basically conditioned to sexualize yourselves. This is why so many of you are encouraged to go to the gym. It's not so that you can be healthy, it's so that you can attract women and make yourselves a sex object, okay? Basically turning yourself into sex objects. So that's another reality that we need to understand. These habits that you guys are developing, not good for you. At least it's not coming from a good place when we talk about patriarchy culture, okay? All right, the fourth habit So this solidifies the fourth thing, the fourth bad habit we're talking about from patriarchy culture, is that this solidifies why it's going to be important for you as a man to stop listening to other men who are upholding the system. Okay, because again, a lot of the advice from other men upholding the system is basically just continued indoctrination and enforcement of patriarchy culture. They tell you go to the gym not so that you could be a healthy individual, but also so you could basically turn yourself into a sex object and attract so many women. Okay, they tell you to numb your feelings. And again, that's going to be self abandonment and disconnection from self. Okay, they tell you to numb your feelings so you can prepare to be this strong masculine man, and it's actually hurting you. So, a lot of what men have been taught and a lot of what men are passing down to each other is actually not good and not healthy for the actual human man. It's, what patriarchy culture wants you to be, this robot, this person that has lost their humanity. And this is why relationships are suffering so much to this day. Okay, so a lot of you guys are going to have to learn to stop listening to a lot of men when it comes to what it means to be a man and how to go from being a boy to a man. If you're a young man watching and listening to this, you really need to filter out, like, okay, where is this leading me? This advice on how to be a man, is it really, keeping me in touch with my humanity, or is it causing me to lose my humanity and disconnect from myself in order to, again, sacrificing your selfhood in the interest of manhood? Okay, how we define manhood needs to change. It needs to include your selfhood as well. Okay. This is why men collectively have been told not to listen to women or to take women seriously, because the system only wants you to care about what other men have to say. Again, men that are going to keep you indoctrinated into this patriarchy culture. And what do these men have to say? Easy. Just listen to any red pill podcast or men who talk about toxic masculinity all day like it is scripture. You are basically conditioned to never be able to receive the antidote to breaking out of patriarchy's trauma cycle. And the antidote isn't women, by the way, because there are men out there trying to reach you and tell you what women have been trying to say all along. Okay, so not only women can tell you what needs to be done, but there are other men out there that you might call, like, may have been called simps or other derogatory names, because again, patriarchy culture wants to enforce men not leaving the culture, men not breaking out of the trauma cycle. Okay. You just have to be able to identify your conditioning that is causing you to tune out to the voices that are actually trying to help you. Patriarchy does a great job of helping you stay in the sinking ship by using shame. You feel shame and you get defensive when women talk negatively about men, even when you don't personally know her or the man that she's talking about, even when she's never met you to make a personal assessment on you. Even when she says no thanks to exchanging her number, it is taken personally by men because this type of insecurity has been passed down for generations now, and men haven't been willing to face the truth and deal with it. It is why men can get so angry with women and even collectively hate women enough to form universities and sites where they enjoy posting about abusing, manipulating, and violating women. The proof is all around us. You just have to be willing to see it and process it at your own pace. And then you need to learn to stop seeing this as an attack on your masculinity and instead be viewing it as being born as a man with an opportunity to correct the past, and that so many men are still clinging to, trying to go back. Okay, the past that so many men are clinging to and trying to go back. All right, so instead of feeling shame, again, when women are sharing our stories and the pain and sufferings at the hand of men, it is a call to action. It is a call to say, hey, I have an opportunity to make sure that I'm nothing like that, and that I have good interactions with women, that I'm a man that women can trust, okay? And questioning how you can show up as that. Because again, patriarchy culture is going to push a lot of you to seek relationships with women that are not good, that are not healthy. And the reality is, again, when we look at the facts, we have to be like, hey, if I want to have better quality interactions with women, what can I do to ensure that that is my story, that that is the case, okay? We can literally look at third world countries that cling to the past and see that it is not what is best for anyone, man, woman, or child. Men of patriarchy even use that as a threat, saying things like, if we wanted to be ruthless as those men, we could do that. If we wanted, to be just like those men in third world countries and like treat women poorly, that we can do that. Okay, there are men that are using that as a threat. And that is a sign which we will dive into in the next video. Patriarchy wants to reduce men and women to having no humanity. It is time more men stop allowing and accepting it passively as just being a man, and to start to take an active, healthy role in shaping your identity as men in society. All right, so if that's you and you're ready, then that's going to be a topic of my next video, okay? We're going to walk through how you can identify within yourself whether you have been marked and whether you have been conditioned to ignore or reuse the help that has been trying to save you from your systematic conditioning before you fall past the point of no return. Okay, and that's basically what happened in this story, is that her ex-husband fell past the point of no return because he got influenced by patriarchy, he didn't heal from his trauma, and he basically got sucked up into that indoctrination. So the whole point of this video, the takeaway that I want you guys to get, is that men really truly need, collectively and even on an individual level, more of you guys need to look at your definition of what it means to be a man and manhood and the culture surrounding that, the culture that is enforcing that. The men in your life maybe that maybe you follow on social media or that are actually in your life, you really need to look at and understand that, hey, what is this definition of manhood like telling me? Is it causing me to lose my sense of self and humanity, my selfhood, to fit into this box, to fit into this image? And then is that image also making me unhappy? Like I don't feel like I could just exist and be valued for existing. I feel like I have to perform and do, whether it's sexually, whether it's as a protector, provider, like I have to do these roles, perform these roles in order to earn love and to be valued and to receive, love. So like we really have to start to re-examine our definition of masculinity and manhood and what it means to be a man, both men and women, but also more so men because you guys are actually the ones living this. You are the men, and you really have to learn like, hey, we need to upgrade our definition. It's time for the definition of what it means to be a man to be upgraded to something that's more inclusive, to being loved, to not just being a performer, to actually being loved for who you are and your character, okay? Because protector and provider, it never included the definition of your character. It is just performance and what you are doing, and we want to change that. We want to love men for who you are as people and not just for what you can do.